In this demonstration, we're going to walk you through some of the features and capabilities of the new performance tool that's been made available by Infor CRM for Saleslogix 8.0 and 8.1. It currently only works on those two versions, but maybe in the future they'll release some index reference files that'll support older versions, but 8.0 and 8.1 for now. So let's go ahead and start the performance tool up, and you'll notice the first tab on the left is where you establish a connection to your Saleslogix database that you want to run the various procedures against. So I've chosen my SQL Server from the drop-down, then logged in as the sysdba user, provided the password, and then when I click on Load the Database, it presents me with a list of all the databases currently installed on that server. So we're going to use the Saleslogix eval database for today's demonstration. So once we've done that, we can move on now to the performance tool next tab, which is indexes. And this is going to, when I click on display indexes, it's going to load all the indexes that are currently in that eval database. And that's what you're seeing now as you scroll up and down. Now the next tab over is going to display any legacy indexes, and this comes into play for anybody that's upgraded from a version of Saleslogix prior to 6.2, and as part of the 6.2 upgrade procedure you had to drop all the indexes and then install new indexes. All the indexes were reloaded for any version newer than 6.2. Now we've come across several customer databases over time where some of that procedure didn't either happen or didn't succeed or wasn't successful. So if you find under the legacy tab that you have indexes listed here, those are leftovers from old versions of Saleslogix, and you're probably going to want to get rid of those by, let's go over back to default. So let's just assume that the account indexes were incorrect, or this address ID one was incorrect. The first thing you have to do if you do find any legacy indexes, you have to do a backup of the indexes. And once you do that backup, it creates a file so you can restore the indexes back again if something went wrong or you find that you really needed those, either legacy or custom indexes. So once you do the backup, you will then find that the drop all and drop selected become available to you. So if I wanted to drop that one, I could click on it and choose drop selected, but we're not going to do that because I do need that one. So again, if you have any in legacy, you can click on the ones you want to get rid of, do a backup, and then drop the selected ones. Then also, if your database has any custom indexes in it, custom indexes would be indexes that you purposely created. Maybe you built a custom table or some kind of screen that performs better with some kind of a custom index. So the custom ones may or may not be needed, and it really depends on the decision made by whoever built that for you, but you would see those listed here if you had any. And then finally, if you have any missing indexes. So if Saleslogix compares the standard indexes to your indexes, and if it found that ones that it expects to be there but aren't there, those would show up in missing. And if they are there, you can then click on Restore and add back into your database default indexes that are missing. So this database looks good. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next tab, which is groups. Groups are another area of Saleslogix that can definitely cause performance-related issues. And just like with indexes, groups were rebuilt in previous versions or from previous versions. So if you have any legacy groups in your database that may have compatibility issues with 8.0 and 8.1, you'd see those listed here. And then the next tab talks about retired users in groups, and you'll see on this tab we do indeed have some problems that we should deal with here. So the first scenario is that we have groups owned and shared to only non-active users. So as you know, you can retire a Saleslogix user but retain all of that retired user's data, including their groups. And so if that retired user or non-active user has any ad hoc groups, those can again cause performance issues with the system. Also, if you have any groups owned by non-active users but shared with other users, you can repair that here also, and you can see we have one. And then also, it looks at groups owned by active users but shared with non-active users. I don't have any ad hoc or dynamic groups that fall into that category, but I will want to fix this particular one where groups owned by non-active users but shared with active users. I probably can decide, well, I don't really need them, so I can just go ahead and delete that. And if I choose delete and then choose delete and reassign or reassign, you'll see now that that one ad hoc group that was owned by a non-active user has now been removed from the database. Okay, so let's move on to the next tab, which is speed search. Speed search is another part of Saleslogix that does require some maintenance. For the most part, it works all by itself without maintenance, but we have found that from time to time it should be truncated. And so we check on the service found and then check speed search button. And you'll see that it is running, so it did validate that it is running, and it recently updated 8 records. But then what you want to do is truncate it, because it will actually get very large over time, and that can slow down the performance of speed search. So if you click on truncate speed search, it goes ahead and runs that procedure for you in the background and shrinks it back down to a more manageable size. The next thing we're going to look at is content expiration, and this deals with your Saleslogix website. So if you're using the web client, this is where you're going to want to do some checks on how things are cached. And caching, when it comes to website performance, can definitely make an improvement in how quickly pages load for your users. So we're going to go ahead and use the Saleslogix website, because that's the name of the Saleslogix website in my IIS server. And then if you choose load content, it's going to bring in 4 different folders of information that the website is built from that benefit from caching. So these 4 folders are common objects, scripts, and libraries that if you don't have them cached, it's going to try to load anything in these folders every time one of your users visits any particular web page in the Saleslogix web interface, web client, which is going to cause data packets that are larger than they need to be. So in essence, you're reloading the same thing over and over again, and that's not necessary. So in the implementation guide, it does talk about setting these 4 folders to a particular setting that's called Use Max Age. And Saleslogix Infor CRM suggests 365 days. So what we can do then is click on Expire and then set that to 365 days. And I can go ahead and do that for all 4 of these folders. Now, why wouldn't you want to do that? The reason is if you've made any customization changes to any screens, those may not show up unless your user does a full reset or refresh of that page. We do find this happens from time to time, so you have to be careful about setting this. If you're making customizations frequently, yes, it does cache this data and make page loads quicker, but it also could mean, depending on how the user's browsers are set, that if it doesn't load updated pages automatically, you'll have to clear their cache in order for them to see perhaps a new customization that you've released. So you do see that there's some other settings that you can use as well. So if you're planning on pushing out a big customization, for example, you're going to build and deploy something, you can set this to expire on a particular day, which could be the day before or the day after you pushed out the customizations. And that way you can be sure that all the users received the new updated screens for you automatically. But again, by default, they recommend 365 days for these pages. Next thing we're going to talk about is precompiling. This also is related to how quickly the Saleslogix web client loads after you've done a IIS reset. So this deals with loading or precompiling web pages on the web server rather than on the client. So the content expiration dealt with client-side caching. Precompiling deals with server-side caching. So what we're going to do is load the web site, again by clicking Load Websites and choosing Saleslogix. And then if I click on Compile the Site, it's going to compile into ASP pages everything that makes up the Saleslogix website from the virtual file system. Now, if you don't do this and you compiled and deployed your website, the first time a user visits each particular web page within the web client, it's going to load very slow. And that's because as soon as the first person clicks on one page, the web's IIS server does the compiling on the fly, but only for that page. So precompiling builds all the pages on IIS before somebody actually clicks and uses that page. So where we see this used a lot is for customers who reboot their web server every night for whatever reason. Just for best practice, they've decided they want to do that. But this is going to cause the issue where then the first user who shows up in the morning and starts using the web client is going to experience slow performance each time they click on some new tab or screen in the web client. So what they've done here is given you the ability to create a batch file that does this whole precompile procedure. Now I can push the button and it'll take a little while to compile it all, which is fine. But what I could do is create this batch file and then use some kind of scheduler, task scheduler for example, to run this batch file after you've rebooted the web server. So if you reboot at 1 o'clock every morning, the web server, you may want to run this batch file at 2 o'clock. And that way when the users come in the next morning, they have a very fast performing system. So a pretty nice little tool they built in here. And then finally there's a logging tab. And so what this is doing is it's recording every change that we made during this session. So if I changed anything or did anything in this session, it's going to be listed in the logs so that I can keep a record of what I've done in here. So if you come into this performance tool maybe once a week or whatever you do, you can then export those logs out to a file to keep a record of everything that you've been doing as part of your maintenance procedure. So that's a brief walkthrough of what the performance tool does and is. It's available for download or through your business partner for any current Infor CRM customer that's on 8.0 or 8.1. There's no cost for that. And thank you for watching.